Hello, everyone. Welcome back. So, in today's reading, I'm asking, what are they trying to hide from us? Right? We are being bombarded in the media right now. You have the Epstein files, the Nancy Guthrie thing, Prince Andy's arrested. Now, Trump is going to disclose all the aliens and blah, 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 blah. We're getting bombarded, right? So, the question is, what are we being distracted from, right? And there's a funny clip online where there's a fake press conference as if it's like a White House press conference and they're talking about disclosing aliens. And then somebody finally raises their hand and says, "We wouldn't be happening to invade Iran today, are we?" And it turns out, yeah, we were invading Iran. So there's that as well. So my question is, what are we actually being distracted from, right? Is this a red herring that's trying to overshadow some other event that we should be paying attention to? So I have a bunch of cards on the table, and at the bottom of the deck in the split, I have the Bat and the Temperance card. And these two images together are reminding me of, if you remember the book Dracula or the movie Dracula, how there was that character that was in the asylum. I believe his name was Renfield. And Renfield was an insane asylum patient that already had some form of schizophrenia that suddenly started channeling Dracula. And he was channeling Dracula well before Dracula showed up in London, right? So Dracula's still in Transylvania at this point, and Renfield is in the asylum, channeling him, waiting for the master, collecting the flies and eating them, and starting to exhibit all of these behaviors of Dracula, right? And likewise, earlier in that movie, Dracula is almost like astral projecting himself to his future victims, right? Like, I think he astral projects himself to Mina or Mina's friend or somebody in the beginning, right? Where it's like he's not physically there, but it's like he's haunting their dream space, he's haunting their mind, all of that. But specifically with Renfield, it's like Renfield was already in the asylum when Dracula started possessing him, basically, which would imply that Renfield was already suffering from some sort of mental illness, right? Most likely schizophrenia. And what this is making me think is that everything that we're being bombarded with right now is kind of pushing people there, right? Like, we're all feeling a little schizo when we look at all of this information, and like the only way to rationalize it is to bend the mind in crazy ways. And it almost makes me wonder if that's an aspect of what it is that we're being subjected to, right? It's like, is a gateway being opened, so to speak, right? Because if Renfield was already susceptible to Dracula, right, it's like that gate was open. And of course, there's all of, what would you say, the idea that, schizophrenic people could actually be considered shamans in other cultures, right? Because they have that gateway open. But it's almost as if everything that's happening right now is trying to induce something like that in order to make people vulnerable to that energy, right? And it's like, what was the energy of Dracula? It was an energy of bloodlust, right? Of indifference for life, or feeding off of the life force of others, right? And with everything that's happening in the media right now, it is pushing people towards bloodlust, right? And a desire for vengeance, right? Which is understandable when you see everything that we're being exposed to, but particularly aimed at one group, right? The group that Epstein would be the most associated with. And considering that that is their script, right? And by they, I mean everybody, right? The Catholics, the Muslims, it doesn't matter who you're pointing at. It all ends with the destruction of one thing, right? I have a feeling that it's like that is being pushed on us purposefully, because that cannot happen unless we consent to that happening, right? That particular Armageddon scenario that's in the book, so to speak, right? And again, it's the bloodlust, right? It's like every day you can go on Twitter and scroll through and see a dozen different people calling for some sort of public hanging, right? It's like, and that never ends well, right? So that being said, that's the primer of the energy that I'm seeing in general, right? Is that it's like that is trying to be induced, but it's still distracting from something else. And what it looks like, just as like the overall of all the cards I have on the table, is as if there's like a window of opportunity that is time sensitive where something can be pulled off in order to steer things in a particular direction for the collective. But in order to pull that thing off, the proverbial they have to do a very risky move, which is what they're doing right now, which is effectively showing their hand, right? It's like the only way that they can pull it off is by exposing themselves, which is risky, but that's the way that they steer things in this direction. This window of opportunity that I'm talking about seems to be a window that could also allow things to go in another direction, right? A very positive kind of direction. So let's jump into the cards that are on the table. I have, if I can pick them up, sorry. 1, 2, 3, there we go. I have the Four of Cups is the first card on the table, with the Four of Pentacles, and then the Knight of Pentacles. So it kind of looks like this. So the Four of Cups to me is giving me the energy of a distraction. Because the Four of Cups in general can talk about distraction, right? The Rider-Waite version is the one where the guy's distracted by the Three Cups, but he doesn't see the Ace of Cups behind him, right? But it's also reminding me of a scene from American Horror Story Season 3, which is the season with the witches, where the witches create this maze and they fill the maze with grain and they lead all of these rats through the maze because it's some sort of ritual, right? And it's like, that's what I feel like the distraction is, that it's like leading things into a trap, right? It's like this Four of Pentacles here looks to me almost like a Chinese finger trap kind of thing, right? Where like if you put your hands in it, you could get stuck. And likewise, this Knight of Pentacles that's focused towards the past is basically saying, kind of like, look over here. But this particular Knight of Pentacles, it kind of looks like a head on a wall. What would you call that if you poached an animal and you put its head on the wall as a trophy, right? That it's almost like a mask that something is kind of speaking through, right? Which could be this Dracula Renfield energy of speaking through people without them even really realizing it, right? So it could be people in the media that are very well intentioned, right? That have no darker agenda of their own, right? But that just genuinely want to get to the bottom of this, but they're, for lack of a better term, possessed by something that is encouraging them to look in the wrong direction, right? That's the best way that I can say it. And the ones that are effectively, the rats in the maze, so to speak, it's kind of like us, right? We're being breadcrumbed and led through all of these different scenarios with the hopes of entrapping us. But the thing that we're being distracted from, the next card behind these cards, is the Judgment card, right? And look at this Judgment card. So this is coming behind the mask, right? The mask, the distracting mask that's saying, look over here, not over there, even if the intentions are good or bad. It's distracting from this Judgment energy, right? And this particular Judgment card has the Dove, right? And of course, it's hard to look at this without seeing something pseudo-religious, right? Whether you want to call it the return of the Christ consciousness or the 5D, the new earth, some sort of ascension, right? It feels like that. And I'm sorry, all of a sudden there's some sort of very loud truck outside of my window. You just can't win, I swear to God. I've been trying to do this all day and I've had so many distractions. And what are they? Are they drilling outside of my window? Jeez Louise. Distractions, see? It's just like, you're trying to do what you're trying to do, but the distractions are not just distractions that are designed to point you in a certain direction, but they are also distractions that are designed to get an emotional reaction from you. That's what I'm seeing in the rest of these cards. So let me pause this for 1 second and I'll be right back. Okay, I'm sorry about that. But I mean, thank you to Spirit for helping me clarify this energy, because it's helping me make sense of it. I mean, these really are distractions that are designed to trigger a particular emotional response, right? Which would be anger, bitterness, vengeance, resentfulness, whatever it would be, like anything that's just an easy trigger that's going to upset you in some sort of way, right? And it's like we're being bombarded with those emotional triggers right now, but they're particularly trying to distract from this judgment energy that's trying to come through, right? So I was saying the window of opportunity. It's like things can go left and go in a bad direction, but they can also go towards whatever this is that's either present right now or in the process of showing up, right? And we're being distracted from that. And what's interesting is that right beneath this rat card, or the Four of Cups card, excuse me, there's the cobra, right? And the cobras eat rats, right? Or mice or something like that, right? So it's like being pushed into the snake pit to kind of activate our venom, so to speak. I honestly think that that's the best way to describe it, right? Because those are all of the stories about the loosh and the loosh farms, right? That it's like they don't seem to get much out of happy energy. It seems like they seem to feed off of lower vibrational energies, right? And a lot of the stories too about whether it's the ascension or the event or the split or the new earth, whatever it is, it's like where you wind up seems to be determined by your vibration, right? For lack of a better term, right? That it's like if you're in a negative place expecting negative things, then theoretically you would go there. And if you're in a more positive place experiencing, you know what I'm saying? But this energy, of all the cards that I have on the table, it is the biggest energy that's coming through. So I don't think, I mean, not even I don't think, I know that this is not at all going to thwart whatever it is that's coming through, but that's what they're responding to, right? That's what they're trying to distract us from, this other energy that's very present. And I remember particularly back in September, October, November, that time period, there was still a lot of crazy stuff happening in the media. But I remember having a lot of conversations with my friends and other, very conscious people that were all saying, if I wasn't watching the media right now, if I didn't know that I was supposed to be upset about all of these things, I would think that we would have hit the new earth, right? That we've landed on some sort of great timeline, that everything is really positive, right? And it's like, personally, I feel like I've backslid since then and gotten into a more frustrated, angsty kind of space. But look at what's moving through the collective right now, the venom, right? Literally. And that's where the rat in the maze is being sent to, right? And it's the idea that like anger is a poison that you give to yourself in hopes that it'll kill your enemy, right? It's like that's very much so what this is showing to me right now, right? So it's like the collective is being encouraged to spiritually poison itself by normalizing and rationalizing bloodlust, by giving the collective a designated adversary that it's okay to call for that bloodlust on, in hopes of steering the collective towards some sort of timeline that matches that, right? But the next card that I have on the table, which is underneath the trap and the distraction, is the Ace of Cups. And on the Ace of Cups, you can see that the dove from the Judgment card is showing up and dropping this little communion wafer into the cup, right? The cups that are supposed to distract us, which is effectively like an epiphany that wasn't supposed to happen or that wasn't accounted for, right? That it's like, let's use the Epstein files as an example, right? Let's say that in those 6 million documents, like 90% of it is designed to be distraction, that's supposed to put things in the wrong direction or whatever it may be, right? But it's almost like somebody somewhere stumbles upon something in all of this that actually activates this positive energy that's coming through, right? It's again like the energy of epiphany or realization, but it feels like healing, right? Again, it feels like that energy that moved through back in September, where, again, it was almost like an energy of peace just kind of moved through the collective. I don't know how to say it, not for everybody, but at least for like the people that I was talking to, myself included, that it's like it felt like this split, new earth, old earth. And again, it's like something positive and reaffirming coming out of this that again is matching this dove energy from the Judgment card. And of course, the dove makes me think of the story of Noah's Ark, right? That's at least, the esoteric biblical precedent for the dove. And if I remember it correctly, I believe it was like Noah sent either like a raven or a crow first, and it didn't return. And then he finally sent the dove, and the dove did return. And of course, it returned with the olive branch, and that meant that the flood was over and that everything was good, right? So it's a sign of peace. It implies that things are actually better than they look. But there's something about the energy of the return, right? That it's like the dove came back. Everything else went out and it did not come back. But the dove came back. And it's coming back in the Ace of Cups as this energy of epiphany, right? So it's almost like a storyline that the collective forgot about that somehow changes the context of the collective identity, right? Because cups talk to me about identity, about how it is that you see yourself, right? And the Ace of Cups in general usually talks about the energy of baptism, right? So if you think of baptism esoterically, it really is like an identity reboot, right? You're going from the original sin operating system to the new operating system, whatever it may be, right? But even outside of the Catholic Christian context, it's like that ritual, it's a rebirth ritual, right? Where your identity changes, right? And sometimes you're given a new name and a new this and a new that, right? So there's something about that, right? Where it's like, it's a storyline that people had forgotten about that suddenly returns. This one returns, but it returns with the message of peace, the message that, again, it's like the war is over, the flood is over, the waters are receding. You've effectively made it to the new earth, right? It's kind of like a message like that. And at the center of the spread, I have the Nine of Cups. And it seems like the Nine of Cups is reacting to this Ace of Cups. But this particular Nine of Cups, it almost has the energy of like the genie being released from the bottle. I don't know if you can really see it on the card, but she's holding what looks like Aladdin's lamp. And then she has, the 9 cups around her. And the Nine of Cups in general talks about a full circle moment, but this is really talking about a full circle moment, right? And it's the type of full circle moment that heals the past, right? Because it's like, it can change the context of the past. I usually say that it's like the Nine of Cups seems to be the medicine for the Nine of Swords or the Nine of Wands, right? So the Nine of Swords is like coulda, shoulda, woulda, regretting the past. And then the Nine of Wands is like PTSD and fearing the past or fearing the future based on the past, right? Versus the Nine of Cups is the healing power of the full circle moment or the epiphany, where you suddenly realize that things went better than you realized they went, right? Where it's like, in hindsight, you say, okay, thank God that door closed because it rerouted me towards this phenomenal experience that I wasn't expecting or wouldn't have had otherwise. And maybe you can look back and be like, oh, wow, if I had gone through that door, I would have wound up in that situation, which was a nightmare because in hindsight, you can see that it didn't go well, right? Something like that. So something like that is happening for the collective, where maybe, it's almost like it's healing the collective's own self-hatred. Oh my gosh. That, like, I'm getting like a goosebumpy nail on the head kind of energy. Jeez Louise. That whatever it is that comes out of this accidentally, right? It's like, it's almost tangential to everything that we're being served, right? If everything we're being served is a distraction, it's like this thing is not on that plate, but it's somehow tangential to it, like a different storyline. And when this energy goes viral, it changes the collective's identity and heals the collective's own self-hatred, right? And I don't know, as somebody that was raised Roman Catholic, it's like I'm just thinking of all of that Catholic programming, but it's kind of the same, right? It doesn't really matter what religion you're born into, it seems somewhat consistent, right? But also ideas around success, right? Because it's like I think a lot of self-hatred comes from success, right? That like if you want to be successful, you have to do X, Y, and Z and follow these particular terms and conditions and play these roles and whatever. And I think it's almost like there's something about the characters that are involved in the narrative we're being served, right? Particularly with Epstein, is that they were all successful, right? They were all the people that our parents told us that we should be, right? Or that these institutions told us that we should be, or that we should look up to, or that that's noble, that's righteous, right? And it's kind of like the idea of karma, right? Where the Ace of Cups talks to me about having a karmic clean slate, right? Which is the same idea as baptism, right? It's removing the original sin and giving you a clean slate. And I think that a lot of people, the collective, subliminally or subconsciously has this idea that they're not successful because of karma, right? Where I feel like the best example would be like in India, in Indian culture, right? Where it's like if you're born into the lowest caste and you were living in the slums of Delhi, it's like that belief system is saying, well, you must have done something effed up in a past life, because if God loved you, then you would have been born into royalty, right? So it's like you're here, you're suffering because you need to atone, right? There's something about this mess that we're being fed that is healing that, because people are suddenly realizing that it's like, oh, well, if bad people are living successfully, then that would imply that success has nothing to do with karma, right? You're not going to tell me that the royal family wound up where they wound up because they're good people, right? It's like we can all kind of see that. But that's the thing, is that it's like those of us watching this video, we've been seeing that, right? We saw that 2, 3, 4 centuries ago. But the average folk, they ain't seen it yet, right? Those that are not watching my videos, but they're watching Mr. Beast videos, right? They haven't seen that yet. They don't get it. They're starting to get it. And I also believe that the shadow workers behind the curtain are also starting to get that, right? Because the next card that's coming up is the Hermit card, which is giving me kind of like the same energy, like I was saying in the beginning, like the Dracula energy, right? How Dracula was moving through Renfield and like psychically manipulating Renfield from a distance, right? And how I was saying that that seems to be just, let's say, the media, right? And again, it's not that these people are doing things nefariously or that they have any particular agenda, right? It's like they could genuinely just be covering the news and being like, hey, look at this. I think this is where we need to look. And whatever it is that's behind the curtain that is pushing that is aware of the fact that the emotional response from the collective is not what they want it to be, right? They're hoping that it's going to be venom, right? But instead, it's this dove energy, right? There's an energy of almost like a weird energy of peace that's actually coming out of this, as opposed to the bloodlust, right? And the next card on the circle, or on the spread, excuse me, is the sea serpent, which again is a circle, right? You can see that full circle moment, but it's the cobra, right? It's the cobra eating itself, choking on its own tail, which I think, again, is this hermit energy, which I just want to point out on this card. You can see Saturn in the foreground there, right? So something's up with Saturn. I don't know if you saw, I think at some point in the last week or two, there was a giant statue of Baal that they burned in Iran, which quite frankly, I don't even know if that was real, right? In the age of AI, it's like, I don't know. I don't know what's real anymore. But either which way, they had like a 20-foot tall statue of Baal that was made from some sort of flammable material, and they lit it on fire. And I'm like, isn't that kind of sort of something you would do if you were trying to like empower Baal? You know what I mean? I don't really know how Baal works. I don't know. I'm not a Baal girl myself, but my understanding is that sacrifices were made to Baal by burning them, right? Particularly people, particularly children. This is what I heard. So if I'm going to burn a statue of Baal, you get what I'm saying? Like, it feels counterproductive either which way. Why did I go off on that tangent? I'm so sorry. Um, yeah, so something's up. Something's up. Saturn showing up. Watch my video about the black cube, Maduro, blah, blah, blah. The next card on the spread, I have the Five of Pentacles. And what's interesting to me about that is you can see this wilted rose, right? And here the Hermit, which has the Saturn energy, he has this staff that's covered in roses, right? So as if this rose represents his magic wand, right? Or his power. And this rose is wilted, right? Which it's giving me the idea of like a rose that hasn't gotten water, right? Not like sunlight or anything, but it hasn't gotten water, which esoterically would mean it isn't being fed the emotions that it requires, right? So I'm looking at all of this and saying they're looking for a particular emotional response, particularly bloodlust, vengeance, anger, hatred, whatever. That is not what they are receiving. They're not getting enough of it, right? And it's wilting the rose. It is wilting the magic, and ultimately this venom cobra is choking on its own tail, right? And was there anything else that I wanted to say about that? Because it's like as this thing wilts, again, I was saying this Four of Pentacles almost looks like a trap, right? That they were trying to get everybody stuck in something. But the next card on the table after this wilted rose is this Two of Pentacles, where you can see it almost looks like this whale is emerging from the deep sea, right? It's like it's surfacing. And the Two of Wands usually talks about the expansion of horizons, right? It's almost like the map expanding. Like I would think back in the 1500s when they quote unquote discovered the Americas or whatever, that would have been a Two of Wands moment, right? Where the world suddenly expanded. And it's almost like it's breaking through whatever this is, as if you were trying to like tie down an elephant with dental floss, right? It's like inevitably the elephant would be able to break itself out of that, right? And with wands too, it's like wands represent concepts or abstract concepts or ideas, right? I'm trying to see if there's any other wands on the table, and there's not. But it's like in many different videos I've talked about the event, right? The idea of the event, whether it's Project Looking Glass or any other way of looking at it. And the thing with the event is that we don't know what it looks like, right? And it's just a blank space in the data. We know that it's there, but there's no details or description of it. And my hot take on that is that whatever the event represents, we don't have the language for it yet. That's the best way to describe it. It's like we do not have the language to describe the event. It would almost be like trying to describe a color you've never seen or a flavor you've never tasted, right? It's like it's an impossible task in a type of way. But with this Two of Wands and the expansion of the map, the expansion of concepts, the expansion of vocabulary, it's like something is coming in that would be the event, right? It's like I think we're in the event, quite frankly. How I was saying at the beginning, there's this short window of time to do something, and that's why they're doing everything now, right? But there's also opportunity for good stuff to come in. But in order for them to push things in a bad direction, they have to show their hand, right? That's the only way that they can do it. But of course, that also exposes them, right? So it's like, was this part of the plan the entire time? And again, it's like it seems like something is realized with this epiphany, with this full circle moment that changes the context of the collective identity and heals the self-hatred, because we realize our own divinity, right? It's like, I think that would be the easiest way to say it, right? It's like somehow getting confirmation that God loves you. I think that's the easiest way to describe it, right? For the most part, that's a belief system for people, right? It's like they want to think that God loves them, but they're not sure. And that's very sad, but I think we've all been there, right? And then, of course, if you're watching this video, it's like I'm sure you've had plenty of experiences where you've seen the miracles, right? It's like there is no explanation for how you have survived up to this point beyond some sort of angelic divine intervention, right? God himself, whatever it may be. And it's almost like something like that for the collective, where it's like it goes from faith to knowing, right? Because now it's like the concept can be articulated and defined and witnessed somehow, some way. But what would that mean? Because the next two, the final cards that I have on the table, is the Page of Swords and the Moon. And the Page of Swords is kind of like somebody that's very on guard and very suspicious. It's like, this is what I feel like the collective's energy has been. But there's a part of me that just wants to like pause, and because particularly with the moon, what I'm seeing is that it's like the moon represents liminal spaces, right? The dream world, the 5D, that which kind of defies language or is even like pre-language, right? It's primordial, it's primal, it's that kind of energy. But with the way that it's depicted between these two trees, these two towers, like it feels like a gateway opening up to that subliminal realm, right? Which brings me back to this Dracula Renfield energy, right? Where it's like, I almost feel like they're trying to induce schizophrenia in people in order to open this gateway to make them more susceptible to the Dracula energy, right? Of bloodlust and vengeance and hostility and whatever. But instead, it's opening something, but it's opening it to this judgment energy as well, which is exponentially more powerful, right? It's like this judgment energy looks like it's coming out of a field of bats, right? I didn't even realize that until now. But it's like there's a million little bats here trying to compete, and then boom, the judgment just blows right through it with the Ace of Pentacles behind it, right? So it's like it's bringing a new timeline. Oh, and the Crow is behind that too. And the Ace of Swords, right? I was saying the Crow doesn't come back. That's so interesting. Because again, in the story of Noah's Ark, right, he sends out the crow did not return, he sends out the dove does return with the message of peace, right? So it's like, I guess the crow could represent the false hope, right? We've had so many false hopes. Q, right? How many people fell for that? I think that's the best example, but like a million different examples, right? Of just red herring distractions that are designed to create false hope. And I think 2012 was a major aspect of this recipe for psychosis, right? That there was a lot of false hope with that, right? Like how many of us were disappointed that we didn't get beamed up into the spaceship for 2012? I know I was. So I think we're all still reeling from that. But with this Page of Swords, again, it's like the Page of Swords always reminds me of James Bond, right? It's like I feel like James Bond or anyone that would be like a spy like that would be in a Page of Swords kind of energy where they're looking for evidence, they're looking for data, they're looking for something to support their belief or their mission or whatever it is, right? So it's like we all have that. We have the confirmation bias. We've been fed a lot of narrative, a lot of crows that never came back, right? That just gave us a lot of false hope and led us into different directions, right? Particularly the ones that are savior meme driven, right? Particularly, like that's the Q thing, right? The Q thing was sit on your hands and wait. They're going to take care of it. Patriots are in control, right? And you just stay at home and do nothing, right? But it's like all of these things have been designed to kind of hijack the reticular activating system, right? That thing in our brain that filters out information based on what we're looking for, right? It's seek and ye shall find. If you're not looking for it, you can't see it, right? That's like if you're looking for something in your house, you're looking for your keys, and maybe they're red, right? But there's something blue on top of it. It's like you're not looking for blue, you're only looking for red, so you can't see the keys. It just filters them out, right? It's like the reticular activating system was hijacked to filter out the dove, to filter out the good thing coming back, right? So that we would just be looking for these crows that were never going to return, right? So it was just kind of hijacking the confirmation bias and exacerbating the self-hatred, right? Which we're most likely going to try to project onto something. So then we're given the designated adversary and said, okay, project it onto this. And the reason why all of this seems to be heating up right now is because there's some sort of very short window of opportunity for them to do something, right? But I've said it once, I'll say it again, you can't arm wrestle with God, right? You could be the strongest MFer that there is. You can't arm wrestle with God. And I think that that's just where their hubris is, right? It's like, perhaps if they had gotten the emotional response that they wanted, they would have had a fighting chance to pull off whatever it is that they wanted to pull off, right? But with this wilted rose, it's like I'm just seeing that they did not get the emotional response required to amplify their magic, right? That was the hermit's magic, the Saturnian magic that's being worked. And Saturnian magic, by the way, it's about stalling progress, right? So there's a lot of stories about Saturn, like mythological, archetypal stories about Saturn, where Saturn likes to, how do you articulate it? There's a story about Saturn and Capricorn, right? So Capricorn is supposed to be one of the children of Saturn, but it's like Saturn would work some sort of time magic on Capricorn that would keep aging it in reverse, right? So it's like, as soon as it would turn 18, he would turn it into a child again because he didn't want to see Capricorn grow up and leave him, right? It's like Saturn never wanted his children to leave him, so he would age them in reverse in order to keep them there, and of course do other horrible things, but that's a whole nother rabbit hole, right? But it's like there's something about Saturnian energy that's about stalling progress, right? And it's like all of this really brings me back to the little season rabbit hole, right? The little season rabbit hole is the idea that, if you know the book of Revelation, that we're not in the beginning of the book of Revelation like they always say we are, but we're actually at the end of the book of Revelation, right? And in the book of Revelation, there's this thing called the little season. So first you have, the tribulation and the battle of Armageddon, then there's the second coming, then there's this thing called the 1,000 years of peace, then there's the little season, where for whatever reason, Jesus decides to release Satan from the pits of hell to rule earth once more before he can be finally smited, right? And if you would believe that we're in the little season right now, it would be that it's like Satan, or whatever you want to call it, has been given license to do whatever it wants to do for a finite period of time, right? But one would imagine that judgment card, the dove, God is doing this on purpose, because ultimately, no matter how strong they think you are, it's again like putting dental floss around an elephant, right? You can't arm wrestle with God. So it's almost like the game was rigged, but maybe it's like this energy just needed to be drawn to the surface, right? Maybe there's certain aspects of it that were so hidden and so corrupted and so concealed within its own darkness that it needed to be drawn out and seen, because awareness is the universal solvent, right? It's like that's the thing that could actually heal it or integrate it or fix it once and for all. And that's just really how this energy is feeling, right? Where it's like it feels like a lot of, like the distraction in and of itself is a setup by God to get them to expose themselves. But what they're ultimately trying to do within the context of the little season in the book of Revelation is, it's like, if they know that we're in the little season, right? If they know that we're in the end, that the second coming already happened, that the judgment already happened, and all of those things, Armageddon, if they convince everybody that we're at the beginning of the story, waiting for those events, and then they script events to mirror that sequence, would that be some sort of Saturnian magic that's designed to wind the clock back, right? Almost as if they're thinking, maybe we can cheat the system, because we know we're in the little season, but if we make everybody think that we're actually at the beginning of the book as opposed to the end, could that actually trick the system into thinking that as well? I don't know. But that's what I'm seeing. Which, I guess, again, Ace of Cups, when you realize you're actually safe, when you get that proof of God, which I feel like is in the process of happening, who knows how that's going to happen, but I'm trying to think if there's another way to articulate that. I'm sorry. Just because Well, my hot take, I guess I'll leave it on this. My hot take on the whole little season thing is that in that story, in Revelation, there's two groups of dead, right? The first group of the dead that rise during the second coming, and the second group of the dead that rise during the little season. And my hot take is that they are two groups of dead because they experience two different kinds of trauma, right? So it's almost like the first group is a group that was able to unplug themselves when the fall of mankind happened, or it was like whatever it was that happened, they were able to avoid it, right? There was a Dolores Cannon QHHT session in one of her books where a woman talks about the fall of mankind, and she said that in the beginning, like immediately, as soon as things started going left, there were people that tried to unplug themselves from the simulation, but they couldn't get out because the simulation was already locked. So they wound up going into these crystal hard drives in the earth. And the dead in Christ, I think, are the dead in the crystal hard drives, or the people that had unplugged themselves, couldn't get out, and therefore got backed up on these servers, right? So they didn't experience the worst of the worst, they just experienced a little bit, right? So that's who the 1,000 years of peace was for. The rest of the dead, those that would be here for this whole Mishigots, were the ones that could not get into the hard drives, because in the QHHT session, that woman was also saying that the hard drives had like a finite window of opportunity for you to unplug and get into them. So anybody that was left on the surface would have basically just experienced a nightmare realm. They would have experienced the illusion of separation from God most of all. On top of everything else, they experienced the illusion of separation from God. And there's an interesting rabbit hole. It's Julian Jaynes' theory of the bicameral mind. He calls it the bicameral mind theory, where he believes that at one point our consciousness was like a hive mind consciousness where we effectively interacted with the archetypes in the guard, that it was like people didn't have an internal voice in their head. I don't know how else to say it, but it's like when I think a thought, I know that it's my brain thinking the thought, right? But back in the day, it was like people didn't have their own thoughts, but they would see Athena or Apollo or Jupiter or any of these other things that they would converse with that would basically give them advice and tell them what to do and how to move, right? And Julian Jaynes' argument is that during the Bronze Age collapse, which would have been roughly 1200 BC, when all of the Mediterranean cultures that built all of the megalithic architecture, the big stuff, they all seemed to collapse overnight, right? And his theory is that it was like the bicameral mind got shut off, that whatever it was that connected us to the hive mind or connected us to God or connected us to spirit shut off, and all of a sudden we were all just locked into our own individual experiences, right? Where it's like now we had an internal monologue, but it was just us, right? Or we thought that it was just us. We didn't realize that it was still the same thing that was active. So I'm sorry to go down that tangent, but that's my hot take on the little season, right? Is that the first group of the dead that would have risen during the 1,000 years would have been in relatively decent shape because they unplugged very quickly and got into the hard drives. The second group of dead did not luck out as well, dealt with the illusion of separation from God for so long that they thought that it was real. And even if you're freshly reincarnated into the world, you still have that program running, right? Which I wouldn't really qualify as karma so much as I would just qualify it as trauma. I think that's the best way to explain it, right? But trauma in German means dream, right? So there's something about that where it's like, it's something that exists in the astral or in the dream mind. I don't know where I'm going with that. Well, I guess it's a projection, right? It's like, it's like, what was that book, Don Quixote, where you turn the windmills into giants so that you can fight them, right? It's like, if you're looking for an adversary, if you find one, if you incarnate believing that there's this illusion of separation between you and God, then you're going to experience it, right? So somehow, some way, it seems like the end game with whatever it is that's happening here ultimately is that it's going to dissolve the separation, the illusion of separation between ourselves and God and everyone. And like I was saying, the dream consciousness, it's like maybe dreams in the dream world are an aspect of that, and evidence of that. Maybe that's where it comes from, or maybe that's how it starts, right? Like a global dream phenomenon. That would be interesting. We shall see. I'm gonna leave it there, y'all. I love you. Thank you so much for watching this and dealing with me. You know me, I'm a chronic optimist. I always say the AI is not going to replace us, it replaces them. And I'm looking forward to that. So if you're interested in a reading of your own, hit me up. I'm out here on these streets. Otherwise, I will see you at the next YouTube reading. Bye, y'all.